Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our monthly webinar addressing the mental health disparity among LGBTQIA+ students. We are so honored to have so many people joining us today. And if you haven't done so already, I know we've just let you into the webinar, but we'd love to take a minute and have you tell us in the chat where you're coming from. While you're doing that, I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Alina Carroll, and I am the VP of Corporate Development and Marketing for Upswing. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm joined today by some other members of the Upswing team, as well as Tekhara Watson from BetterMynd, Upswing's mental health partner. Before we get started today, I wanted to review today's agenda as well as a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. We will send the recording as well as your free professional development certificate via email in a few days. I also wanted to remind everyone that again this month, we are going to be discussing what may be a sensitive topic for some people. We kindly ask that everyone in our audience be professional and courteous to each other and their peers in the room as we are all here to learn and grow together. There's also going to be about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for any questions. If at any time throughout today's webinar you have a question, please post them in the Q&A and we'll make sure to address them as best we can. For those of you who may not be familiar with Upswing, I did want to take a few moments to introduce you to our company as well as our mission. Upswing was founded 11 years ago by Melvin Hines, our current CEO, and Alex Pritchett, our current COO. They founded Upswing with the singular goal to help more non-traditional and marginalized students to graduate college and achieve their life goals. Since then, Upswing has grown from a tutoring company to a holistic student services provider that partners with colleges and universities across the U.S. and Canada. We work with our partners to bring their services and ours together within a singular, accessible platform to provide support through tutoring, advising, writing support, mental health, and our SMS assistant, Anna. Just last year, we partnered with BetterMynd, a company whose mission is to make mental health support even more accessible through one-on-one teletherapy. Their team and network of licensed and insured mental health professionals work with students, faculty, and staff at over 75 colleges and universities nationwide. Through that alignment and our shared goal to help support more students, no matter where they are or who they are, Upswing now provides one-on-one teletherapy through BetterMynd as part of our mental health products and services. As you will hear more about soon, BetterMynd's founder, Cody, and his story is very similar in so many ways to other students who are experiencing a mental health crisis. Thanks to counseling services on campus when he was a student, Cody was able to receive the help he needed, which inspired him and his team to do the work that they do each and every day. Unfortunately, we're here today because we know that not all students receive the help they need when they need it, possibly because they don't have access to those resources or because of the stigma around mental health. Our mission today is to share more information about the mental health disparity among LGBTQIA+ students. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Tekhara Watson from BetterMynd. Tekhara is the clinical operations manager from BetterMynd and comes to us today with such a wealth of experience working firsthand providing therapy to survivors of intimate partner violence in a community-based shelter and advocacy center. She then shifted to higher education about 10 years ago, serving as a staff therapist at Syracuse University, and later as a senior counselor and training coordinator at SUNY Oswego. Tekhara is in the process of becoming an AAMFT approved supervisor and still maintains a small private practice in upstate New York, where she lives with her family, including her wife, daughter, and cats. So please join me today in welcoming Tekhara. Thank you so much for being here, and we are so excited to hear you speak today.
All right. As I do that, I just want to first acknowledge everyone. Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. So thank you, Elena, for that awesome introduction. So before getting into the presentation, I wanted to first just make a few acknowledgements first. The first being you, the audience. I truly appreciate you taking the time out, especially in the midst of your probably very busy days, to attend this webinar, be it important, but still, I just wanted to acknowledge that. Secondly, the why. I always say when I think about the why, it's also the heart. And both Upswing and BetterMynd's founders were both concerned about the disparities in support for college students and wanted to both create and increase access to services. The LGBTQIA community is one of those groups that has and continues to experience significant disparity. Lastly, I wanted to also acknowledge that this is a diverse group of folks that's on this webinar. And from what I heard, over 200 people that registered, which is awesome. So that just shows how much everyone who's here cares. So with that, I wanted to know from those who are directly supporting LGBTQIA plus folks, to who are completely new and just wanting to learn more. I'm just appreciative of you being there. So with that said, I wanted to be able to first start with some terms and concepts just to be able to provide some foundational and basic information for folks that may not have that information. And this may be just a reminder to others. So beyond LGBTQIA, there's also 2S, which is two-spirited. So with typically in terms of what you may see on TV or what you hear about, it may go to LGBTQ. AI has been more inclusive along with A, which is asexual or ACE for short. But two-spirited is also something that has been more incorporated more recently, especially with our Indigenous folks who do identify as two-spirited, which is a term used to describe by Indigenous folks who have both a masculine and a feminine spirit. And then folks who may not know what intersex is, and I won't spend too much time on this, but for intersex, it's folks who have genitals, chromosomes, or reproductive organs that don't fit into a male or female sex binary. So those two boxes, as I like to call it. And then for excuse me, asexual or ACE, again, that's for short, it's experiencing no sexual feelings or desires whatsoever. Something that I would say is also important to talk about is the plus. So a lot of folks may say, what is this plus? What does this actually mean? So the plus, as you can shows on the screen, is to be able to recognize that it's still not inclusive of everyone. There's limitations, and that there's still an individual or individuals that are being left out. So it's an acknowledgement, essentially, for those folks who are still not either one identifying with concepts, terms, and categories that may be put out there. And again, it can be very boxing. And they're questioning, figuring it out, but also it's just doesn't encompass who they are as individuals as well. So again, just in terms of just getting some basic terms, so just to be able to differentiate, some of the terms. So sex, which is assigned at birth, is something that we are not chosen for, meaning when we are at the hospital, we are assigned female, male, or intersex solely based on our sex organs. So that is what is on our birth certificate, and that is what is determined. Gender identity, on the other hand, is the internal sense of self. So it's how we feel, who we are. So that in turn That in turn includes genderqueer, a trans man, trans woman, agender as well, which is without gender, man and woman. And then sexuality, which is also included in attraction, is bisexual, asexual, lesbian, hetero, pan, and then attraction being aromantic, romantic, or sexual. So for folks that may not know what the term aromantic means, so aromantic is experiencing little to no romantic attraction to other folks at all. So I thought this slide was super important to have, and I won't go too much into detail, especially about pronouns themselves. But I wanted to just make note of a couple of things. So there are a lot of pronouns out there. So a lot of ones that are more binary that we know of, which is she and her, he, him, is things that are we as a society have leaned toward, and there's others as well, as you can see. And again, I won't spend too much time, but I just wanted to be able to have out there that these do exist, and that folks do identify with. Another thing I wanted to also point out is that it's important that to know that you will possibly mess up. You may mess up. I mess up. We all mess up. It's not about getting it right or wrong all the time, and that's okay. It's about continuing to try. It's about taking accountability. It's about acknowledging your mistakes, and continuing to educate yourself and continuing to want to do better. Those are the important parts. And someone who was on the other side and is able to see those attempts, it means the world is a game changer for a lot of folks. So with pronouns, I would say, and it's always, this language is still out there, about preferred pronouns and pronouns. So I would say try to stay away from using preferred pronouns, because it makes it seem like using someone's pronouns are an option when in fact it just is. And something that I am also continuously making sure and being really cognizant of in my own practices with my own clients, and just in terms of paperwork and everything else, of just saying pronouns. Now, in terms of dead name, so I'm sure you see on the side, a little script there that says, when is it okay to use someone's dead name? I actually edited it because it was a little more harsher, than what it actually says. That's actually mine, that says never, which is the correct answer. So dead name, for those that may not know what it is an individual's birth name prior to transitioning. To dead name someone, is to call someone by the name they no longer use. That name is no longer who they are. So a lot of folks who transition or non-binary, and go through names change, through licenses, school documentation, and etc., to be able to use their now name, is also something that can be truly life-saving, because you're acknowledging who they are now. You're acknowledging, um, their name and who it is connected to their identity, and that the name that they were born with is no longer who they are. So unfortunately, sometimes, family members and loved ones are not able to move forward because of their own grief, and they do continue using the dead name of their child, for instance, and that causes a lot of impact to mental health, and just how they view themselves, to be really frank. So, and I won't get too much into this, but there are some terms that I did want to touch base on, about gender. So the question is, there are more than two genders? Short answer, yes, yes, yes. As you can see, it's complex, it's intersecting. It can be also very binary as well, of male, female, trans, gender queer. Though gender queer is also, there's some fluidity when it comes to gender queer. So just to be able to touch on, again, for folks that may not know, of the genders. So for agender, it means simply not having a gender or identifying with a gender. In terms of gender fluid, which you see in the green bubble there, is a person who doesn't identify with a single fixed gender, or has a gender that's more so fluid, which is implied in its name in and of itself. And then gender queer, which you see on the top right there, is about embracing the fluidity of a individual's identity. So Some folks may see themselves, for instance, as both female and male, neither male or female, or they've realized none of these categories really fit for who they are. So they may end up choosing, you know what, genderqueer feels more close to, even though I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's more encompassing to what my experience and my lived experience is as a person. All right, so getting into some of the stats, and just for funny sake, I did have some memes prior to the presentation, but it wasn't possibly to work. But there were some adorable ones with like rainbows, and there was one about, for those who may be SpongeBob fans, that had one that had a rainbow that said analytics, but these work as well. So what are the stats saying? So I actually took this from UMass medical school in terms of providing multicultural care for both mental health and physical and medical assessment as well. So just to read some of the stats here. So 120%, there's an increased risk of homelessness for LGBTQ youth. So the question may be why. It could be a complete rejection from loved ones due to who they are and how they simply are living, which is their own truth, which increases just not having a place of belonging and acceptance. So having to result to being living on the streets or maybe couch surfing. I've had a lot of clients talk about doing that a lot, just being able to live day by day. 1 in 3 youth have been physically threatened or harmed in the past year. And just an FYI, these stats were taken from 2023, so pretty recent in terms of the stats for this. 70% of LGBTQ plus youth experience verbal harassment due to their sexual orientation. 40% of youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. 40% have considered it seriously. 48% of youth engaged in self-harm in the past year. Huge numbers. And lastly, 68% have reported symptoms of generalized anxiety. And I will also add, and this stat isn't on here, but also a big number, and it should be on the next slide, also have endorsed depression as well. So with that said, in terms of continuing with the stats, so this is actually taken from the Trevor Project. And for those who may not be familiar with what the Trevor Project is, they are a nonprofit organization who's absolutely phenomenal, whose focus is actually on suicide prevention among LGBTQ youth. And they provide an amazing service that we actually put for resources for our counselors to use to provide for their clients if needed, for a confidential suicide hotline that's actually supported by trained counselors so that they have that access if needed in those times. So this survey was actually completed with approximately 28,000 youth, which is actually defined as 13 to 24-year-olds within the United States as of 2023. So again, these are actually new stats, and they do one new survey every single year. So some of the findings from the Trevor Project is about approximately 56% of young people who wanted mental health care in the past were not able to get it. And some of the factors for why that is one, will they get it? Will someone understand who I am? If I am navigating a healthcare system, will I be seen? Will I be heard? Will I be validated? And just after all that, just the stigma of mental health. Will someone think I'm crazy or that it's just a phase? I've heard that a lot from folks I've worked with. So despite some of the just natural barriers, as well as unfortunately lack of support from their family members, especially if there's insurance or financial piece that may be an access problem, they're not getting the help that they have wanted despite wanting to engage in therapy. Fewer than 40% of LGBTQ folks have found their home to be LGBTQ affirming. I would I hope and continue to hope that those numbers continue to go up as time goes. But unfortunately, the numbers is small. And that goes back to the stat that I said earlier about homelessness, in which there's not a lot of folks that come from affirming homes that are truly accepting and have that unconditional love for their child or loved one, which results in finding their own chosen family or kinship, as I like to call it, or sometimes it results in them being homeless, unfortunately. Nearly 1 in 3 LGBTQ folks said that their mental health was poor most of the time or always due to anti-LGBTQ policies and legislation. And there's continued laws and questions that are coming up in terms of access to care for folks who want to transition, who want to do hormone therapy, um, who are, and this is sad to even say, but conversion therapy still being out there as well, and being supported in some states. So um, that impacts and has had an impact. It continues to have an impact, especially seeing the news and reading the newspapers about who I am on the chopping block, for lack of a better word, yet again. And what does that mean for me to be able to just live and function as a person? And lastly, on this slide, nearly 2 in 3 folks said that hearing about potential state or local laws banning people from discussing LGBTQ, people at school made their mental health a lot worse. So again, being able to not feel like I'm seen, I'm being not being able to have a space where I'm able to be visible. And I know just from, and this is, I guess, a side personal caveat, but my wife, who is actually a teacher, there's been more and more conversations about what's a quote unquote appropriate and not appropriate to be able to talk about in the classroom, and which it being a neutral space for all and for all to feel welcomed. And sometimes, especially for LGBTQ plus folks, they feel and experience an exclusion because of that. So it's being able to understand and acknowledge that and how that impacts these folks, especially. So why are these folks at higher risk for mental health challenges? So just so you first to point out, so LGBTQ folks are not inherently prone to suicide risk, but because of mistreatment and being stigmatized by society. So I will say sometimes in work, and this is me in terms of my role as a therapist, there have been conversations just with like colleagues about this person is lesbian identifying. I'm guessing the reason why, for instance, that they are depressed is because of it, which is not true. And though, however, with that also said, there is an increased risk of suicidality and mental health concerns because of the treatment that they receive and mistreatment, actually, and stigma, continued stigma in society that increases these factors. And the other point here are LGBTQ folks who experience anti-LGBTQ plus victimization reported more than twice the rate of attempted suicide in the past compared to those who did not experience victimization. So imagine the trauma that these folks experience over and over again, be it physically harmed, threatened, discriminated against, subjected to conversion therapy as they are teenagers or younger kiddos when they quote unquote come out to their loved ones. They're more at risk for having these thoughts of, I don't think I could continue on here anymore, of how much hurt and pain that they're carrying for not being accepted for who they are, and again, seen and belonging. So, does my support make a difference? Yes, 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 it does. Um, so it has shown, again, this is taken from the Trevor Project, but I could also say anecdotally that it 100% makes a huge difference for LGBTQ folks So being able to provide them affirming spaces, both at home, both at school, if it's different places at events, if it's a work environment, it makes a huge impact, an increase to their mental health, one, but it also has shown that there's a lower rate of attempting to complete suicide than those who did not. And secondly, affirming those LGBTQ identities continues to show lower rates of attempts to complete suicide as well. So showing the support, being present, sharing that, yes, I see you, and having true respect and acceptance is a life changer. The question is, how can I foster a more inclusive and supportive space? So the goal of being able to do that is providing an environment where folks of all gender identities and sexual orientations feel truly accepted and heard. So sharing your own pronouns. So I'm thinking about our education folks, and even to myself in meetings or when I am in any type of um, environment, is saying simply, "Hi, my name is Tekhara Watson, pronouns are she, her," and just having it organically so that another person who may be non-binary, or trans identifying, or genderqueer could say, "Oh, you are welcoming." So just being able to have that one instance could be, again, as I know I keep saying, but truly is a game changer of making someone realize, okay, they may be safe and I could be able to talk to them and be who I am. And that heaviness may just be a little bit less heavy. Don't assume others' pronouns, default to using they, them. So again, so we live in a very binary world of he and she. So I always say, and this is actually my list that I've computed, but it's being able to default if you don't know, and not to assume, okay, well, they look male presenting, so it must be he, him pronouns, is being able to say, hey, they look really cool today. Or if it's a group of folks, saying them, versus just defaulting to, again, what society's binaries are, when it comes to folks. So asking for others to share their pronouns if they feel it's safe to do so. So again, I'm thinking about, in a classroom setting, and not to bring up my wife again, but she did say it was okay for me to share this. But as a teacher in high school, she anonymously, I will ask her students, um, during the first couple of days of classes, just to get like some basic information about who they are. And she asked their pronouns, and she makes her own personal list, and ask if it's okay for them, to share it with the class if they want. But more importantly, if she can share it, use it, or is it something that they do not want disclosed? So just in that, she assesses safety. So being able to do something as what may feel, small, is could be huge, because again, it's just acknowledgement, of a person. So using inclusive language. So for saying folks, saying y'all, instead of saying, hey, those girls over there, or those guys. Some people say gang of people. Depends on who you are. That could work too. And I did that because I was like, that for me doesn't work. But saying y'all, saying folks, but being able to use more inclusive language that could be more encompassing versus being just very strictly on gender, can again can change a lot of things in terms of how people feel, if they feel safe, and again, just being able to have your own education of not assuming as well. This is a big one of the big ones. So listen without judgment or assumptions. If you make a mistake, acknowledge and reflect. And I put in parentheses, but not forcing them to accept your apology. So just to start breaking some of that down, and I'll start with the forcing to accept the apology piece. Um, Sometimes that comes in discomfort, or, well, I did say sorry. Why can't they just accept that I messed up? Um, and that's not on the other person to have to accept that. They are on their own journey. They may have one of those days where they have been misgendered all day and they're just not in a space. And no one has to accept an apology, from another person. So being able to acknowledge that and sit with that and reflect, but also from the other side, going back to the first point, is being able to listen without judgment or assuming. But then if you make a mistake, which I talked about earlier, it can happen, it will happen, it may happen. And acknowledging, you know what, I messed that up. I'm so sorry. I'm going to do better next time. What are your pronouns again so I can get it right? And I will continue to work and do it right. That sentence in and of itself, obviously using your own language, will be everything. Continue to educate yourself. This. I will say being a educator in terms of wanting to always be curious, wanting to hopefully make it to a place of being more right, and I put that in quotes just from the previous point, is being able to read books, surround yourself truly with true intention, and that's actually underlined and italicized, true intention with other folks that may not be in your community and of different intersecting identities. But I won't get into that because that's a whole another presentation. But getting outside of what your comfort zone and what your community may be, to be able to have a truer understanding. Um, and like I said, reading books, watching documentaries, watching shows, watching things that aren't so much in a binary of what your world has been can also be very enlightening as well. And then demonstrating support and or allyship. So that could be a lot of different things. That could be, if it's not, I don't know, attending a protest or going to your legislature to talk about ways to be able to really talk about your concerns or support of different things. It could be something as simple as having a sticker, just as I have right here on the side of, hey, this is a safe space. And I should actually put that in quote of safe because that looks differently for so many folks. But just being able to have something of certain reminder of I am a person that I will support you. I see you. And I will not judge you or make assumptions, be it on a syllabus, be it a quick conversation that's had on the first day of classes or a meeting that you have with someone. So even if it's something that is an actual physical representation or something that you say, can be a lot. And these are some of the references just to share in terms of, and you can screenshot it if you would like, of things that I used to be able to gather one and present this presentation, but also I have used in my own world as well, just for my own continued education and who I am. So if you wanted to take a second, you can definitely do that before Elena pops back on to handle the Q&A. All right, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Tekhara. We really appreciate it and would love to open it up to questions at this time. So if you do have any, please feel free to post them in the Q&A. And I see that we do already have one, so I'll go ahead and read it. Someone is asking, how do you navigate a student who needs to use their dead name with family? How do you best support them?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I will say that's a very common situation that a lot of folks have to experience. So some of the things that I would say is, especially if it's someone that you're seeing as one, a supportive person, or as a student of yours, is being able to one, acknowledge how hard that must be of a loved one, um, not seeing and not accepting um, what your name is, and using what was provided at birth. So just one, that acknowledgement is huge. Secondly, and this is something I called an emotional safety plan, and I put that in quotes. But it's being able to say, in those moments when you are home, or if you're home for an extended period of time, and your mom or dad or loved one, sibling, is not supportive of you in any way. So be it from dead name to not just appreciating your presence in the home, what can you do? Is there a space in your home that can be yours? Is there folks that you can go to where you are appreciated and your name is acknowledged, and even to your pronouns are acknowledged as well? So being able to acknowledge, you know what, this is where my family is. This is their process. They are not acknowledging, they're not seeing me. And it's connecting to a community of folks, be it chosen family, who do see you and belong to you. So it's being able to figure out, acknowledging the hurt and pain that student, that person may be experiencing, of like, that's really crappy. Like that really must hurt. Um, and understanding the impact of that, and then figuring out what can we do when you're home to be able to provide that emotional safety as much as possible.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat from Mary about whether or not there are any films or movies that you would recommend for further education. And I'd love to kind of expand that out a little bit and ask if there are any external resources that you would recommend to just help provide more information, again, as we're all learning and growing together.
Oh my gosh. So there are so much. Honestly, I would say one of the biggest foundational to look up in Stonewall, to talk about the history, know the movement of where it began, the transformation of it. Um, there's so many movies, there's so many books out there, documentaries as well. Thinking about Milk being one. And so just there's so many options in terms of just for pleasurable sake, but also as an educational sake. And I don't know if this is possible, Elena, um, but I actually have a list, and I don't have it populated now, of course, but to be able to provide that to the registrants afterward, because I know there's other books outside of just and I say binary of lesbian and gay, but also intersex. Especially, I'm thinking about folks that are Black identifying, thinking about the movie Moonlight, which is um, beautiful and so sad. So there's so many different things, but I would love, if that's a possibility, if I could have the registrants' emails, if they were open to it, to be able to provide that for sure.
Absolutely. And in fact, we can make sure to include that list in our follow-up. So I would
Awesome.
love to do
Awesome.
that for everybody. And I think that there was also some great recommendations from the folks in the room about some movies and books to check out.
Awesome.
So
That's awesome.
definitely some great thoughts coming through in the chat to everyone as well. So
Awesome.
thank you. Another question that came in was, you mentioned during your presentation that it was okay to mess up and that it will happen, especially as you're trying to learn, and even experts such as yourself. How can we as administrators help encourage that type of environment while also promoting inclusivity and greater conscientiousness in our communication?
So I will say, so I first, Elaine, I just wanna, I still so struggle with the idea of expert, just because of what it entails, especially when it comes to this question, because there's so much learning and continuous learning that's necessary. So with this question, I was like, how do I even start this? But being able to have grace and humility in any space that you're in, I would say, are some of the biggest pieces and necessary pieces. So being able to even put out there of, I'm not going to get it right, which is going to involve vulnerability, right? On your part of, I want to get it right. And I'm going to mess up. Even just the acknowledgement of, this is my process. I am also human, and I've been living in a society that's very binary, very het cis gender as well. And acknowledging that um, goes a long way. And folks are so forgiving of, especially if you're trying, and providing that space of openness to want to be able to get it right, and allowing that space for others to share pronouns or whatever information that they would want to share with you. And this is even outside of this context of being able to provide that safety for a person just to show up of who they are, by showing your own humanity and humility, can go a long way.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that as well as your ability to be, human and humble. I think that's much appreciated by everybody. Another question that we have here is, what sort of community groups have you seen colleges or universities implement to create safe spaces for LGBTQIA plus students?
Yeah, so depending on, obviously there's resources and financial potential barriers. So I've seen students actually organize themselves and hold communities, and establish those communities, be it orgs that they have created for themselves, and made, like, this is not something that's represented on campus because we don't have an LGBTQ resource center where there's a space that's just for us. So I've seen folks, and especially college students, who are so dope in terms of the initiative making that they have of wanting to make something, so they make it happen. The secondly, I would say, is I've seen it within dorms, as well. They don't even call it dorms anymore. Residence halls, excuse me. I just dated myself. Residence halls where there's like meeting nights where they'll just have socials that again are just their own and of own community, and like game nights, and such. I've also, so outside of that, there's spaces that I've seen where counseling centers or other folks in departments will provide a space for them to just hang out and just exist and be it from a support group to, hey, this is just a hangout chill spot. There's tea here, there's some cookies, there's some couches and some plushes. So have fun. And there'll be someone hanging around to be able to close up afterward. But then there's obviously other resources like the LGBTQ Resource Center where there's events that can be built, and also spaces that they can also hang out of. Another one is, I was like, it completely escaped me. It completely escapes me. Of course, I'm going to remember it afterward. It's gone.
It happens, no
It
worries at all.
does.
Yes, yes, it totally does, especially when you're put on the spot, right?
You
So
know,
totally fair. We do have another question here, which I think you've touched on a little bit, but if you want to expand on it at all, I think that would be helpful. It says, if we are creating a living learning community to serve LGBTQI 2S plus students, what are the best ways to go about doing this to best support and represent students in the halls? Which I think is kind of referring to in their day to day and in what they're doing on campus.
yeah. So first and foremost, amazing. So folks that have had those community and housing abilities of, just even if it's just a floor, or some I've seen have the ability to just for it to be a whole residence hall, which is awesome. Is just the events that they're able to hold, be it especially during Pride Month or just gatherings, has been amazing to see. But I'm just thinking about even certain things as, the ability to, outside of just the typical of picking who they want to be in the room with and house with, to the bathrooms being all inclusive, to materials that may be there as well. So being able to say, I would say, just from creating these spaces, is also getting the input from them, as from students, of what would you want and what would you want to see and what do you want to have or have the option of to incorporate, to make sure that their voices are heard. Because folks can assume, so again, thinking about assumption, what could make it such a successful experience for these students. But obviously we can't incorporate all of it, because obviously that would be a lot. But if it's things that are tangible and easily accessible, to be able to incorporate, would be awesome, to be able to provide for folks, to be able to increase that safety and acceptance, and belonging, even in that hall as well.
I love that. Thank you very much. And I think this kind of relates to another question about really encouraging that peer-to-peer support as well, especially as administrators. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, so I will say peer to peer support in general has always been seen as the most vital information support that there is versus, I'll even say sometimes a therapist, in terms of providing that space for folks. Peer-to-peer support, especially, I will say, from clients that have shared with me, but also in the LGBTQ community, that's where kinship is developed and family is developed. And being able to say, hey, I'm here and I got you. I understand what you're going to an extent, since no two experiences can be the same. But um, I am here. I can be that voice that you can access if necessary during certain times, even if it's not anything. It could be something as trivial as, "Oh my gosh, two folks of the same sex kissed today, and it was amazing." Just so something as much as that. To life is really hard right now because I just saw on the news something else that's happened. So just being able to have that person, that identified person or persons in someone's life, that peer, it's without question a necessary thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. We got a question here from Laura that
Mhm.
I would like to just share with everybody. She's asking, do you feel people should give themselves the title of ally, or should this be an earned title recognized or given from members of the LGBTQIA plus community?
That's a very complex question. And the reason why I'm smiling is because I say both, right? So, and to an extent. So allyship, that is a term that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different folks, and it's a spectrum, right? In terms of, I'm an ally and I'm in the beginning stages of knowing that there's more than one gender. So and two, I am very much so in the community and I support intersex folks, though I'm not intersex. So it can be very much so a spectrum on what allyship means. So I would actually say, what would allyship mean to you as a person? Does that mean that you are very much so involved in the politics of what's happening, to attending supportive events that's happening, to being a bystander of really egregious event that may be happening and taking a step and stepping forward? So allyship looks so different for different folks. So my question, I guess, would be is, what would you want allyship to look like for you? And if you feel that you are an ally or you want to be a better one, it's about doing something different or getting out of your comfort zone. But um, in terms of being to have it earned by another, so someone within the LGBTQ community, I would say no. So I wouldn't say like a card given per se. That's something that came to mind. The image that popped up in my mind when I heard that. And though, if you're not causing harm and you want to be support, you are for and not against. So that is the start. So you may not get an ally because, again, it means so differently for so many different folks. But um, if you are supportive and you are wanting to be able to disrupt very damaging systems and step up and be there for others who may not have that voice and advocate for others, you're doing something definitely right.
Thank you. We have a question here, and I'd like to maybe just reframe it a little bit because folks may not be familiar with these terms. And, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference or terms used for safe spaces and brace spaces. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually said safe space earlier, and I put that in quotes because you can't always when. So actually, let me backtrack myself. So, what is safety, right, for a person? And how can you always make someone feel safe? So, for safe space versus brave space is being able to show up. It's about being open. It's about being vulnerable. Versus I am a safe person is, or this is a safe space, is something that's not always able to be provided potentially because of different variables. So this is something that has been a constant thing that's been I guess you could say, balance between and battle between. For even, I'm thinking about safe space trainings that happens on campus. Um, to that usually provided by resource centers on campuses, to other trainings such as that, and wanting to change the language to brave space instead, is being able to acknowledge that you're coming in, I'm coming in, and we're sharing this space together, and we're doing it together, versus this, I am 100% safe. There is nothing hard or bad is going to happen. I am not going to mess up. Um, and that's not possible. So being able to acknowledge that there are other variables, and there's bravery that happens in it, versus that this is safe. Um, is it yeah, it gives a different lens.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. We have a really great question from Rory, and this person is asking, are there any college or university level groups or organizations that support LGBTQIA2 plus folks? They would love to connect with another staff or faculty or individuals who are navigating these conversations or policies where they live.
So ironically, Rory, so I again actually have a list, because I'm actually a part of a group called Organize, where we have, and I won't get too much into it, but it has a list of, for immigrant identifying, LGBTQ identifying folks as well. And I don't have it accessible with me, but especially on college level, and, well, I should say institution, college and university level, on a more national level, that is there. So I can definitely give that out to you folks. I had to just access it. That's something that actually came up in a meeting that was had last month, ironically. So there's not a lot, I will say, but there are some out there that you can connect to. And outside of this, I would say, there is the Trevor Project that was talked about earlier. Is That's another resource, not a group, but they very heavily are involved in the youth, as I said, from 13 to 24, that they focus on as a possible resource and connection point as well. But yeah, I will definitely get that actually out to you all as well, along with the other resource that was talked about earlier in terms of movies and resources. Great question.
Yeah, I think the conversation today has just been wonderful. And I do want to just thank everybody again, especially you, Tekhara, for being here and sharing your insights. I think we've kind of come to the end of our Q&A. It doesn't seem like there are any other questions for us to answer today. And I think that that's such a great note to end on. And again, a commitment from us to make sure that we share those resources with everyone in our follow-up. So thank you again for everyone joining us. We sincerely appreciate it. And if you would like to specifically learn about how you can bring Upswing and one-on-one teletherapy to your campus, we invite you to join our free webinar on April 25th at 12 p.m. Eastern for an in-depth discussion and review. I believe we're putting, or have put the link to register in the chat if you would like to register. All right, as we finish up today, I just want to again thank everybody for joining us on our mission to help provide holistic support to more students than ever before. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can visit our website at www.upswing.io or email us at speak@upswing.io. We hope that you all have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Take care.